So here at Trinity, before we get into the sermon, for those of you that might be guests with us, we have what's called a Worldview segment. Let me explain why we do a Worldview segment. We believe today more than ever, Christians need two things. They need to be informed so that they can know how to pray, so that number two, through that prayer, they can be empowered to act. That we have to be informed so that we know how to pray so that we can actually do something to advance the kingdom of God. There's no greater enigma than an uninformed Christian. An uninformed Christian is kind of like a soldier that's unaware of his mission, or a physician who's ignorant of medicine, or an educator who is without knowledge. So a great Hebrew rabbi once said that the opposite of good is not evil, the opposite of good is indifference. And the one sin that we as Christians cannot be guilty of in the time in which we find ourselves living is the sin of indifference. And so we're on the clock, spiritually speaking, right? We believe that the Lord's given us a prophetic window of opportunity to rebuild the spiritual foundations that have been torn up over the past 10 plus years. In order to do that, we have to carpe diem, we have to seize the day. Paul said in Ephesians 5:16, make the most of every opportunity. The Greek word opportunity there is kairos. That there are moments or opportunities that God gives his people that are prophetic. They're a kairos moment, and we have to seize that moment. And in the Old Testament, the prophet Ezekiel, God said, I looked for a man who would rebuild the wall and would stand in the gap, but I found none. May God not find himself without those who are building the wall, the spiritual wall of prayer and salvation, and for those that are standing in the gap. We need to be those that are standing in the gap, which means we need to pray like never before, serve like never before, and give like never before. So I want to talk to you about the Kessler syndrome. You might be saying, what's the Kessler syndrome? It's named after an astrophysicist by the name of Donald Kessler. And it describes a chain reaction of space debris that collides in Earth's orbit. If you didn't think you had enough to be concerned about, right? Now we're dealing with space junk. Space junk in our orbit above our Earth. It includes broken satellites, booster rocket remnants, even small objects like screws. There's over 130 million pieces estimated to be orbiting Earth right now. Now, only about 40,500 pieces are larger than 4 inches. So, the state of Texas, the square miles here in the state of Texas, our great state, 268,597 square miles, meaning if all the space debris was dumped here in our state, every square mile would have 484 pieces of junk scattered across it. Now, space debris travels, get this, at 18,000 miles per hour. That's 7 times faster than a bullet. Now, there are only about 650 major collision events that have actually occurred since 1957. But the exponential increase in satellite launches has heightened the danger. So about 1,000 daily collision warnings are issued by LEO, which is low Earth orbit. I say all that because we've trashed the Earth, we're trashing the oceans with our plastic, and now, are you kidding me, we're trashing outer space. I can hear God in heaven say, I sent a flood that destroyed the Earth. I scattered humans at the Tower of Babel. What's God gonna have to do next before all this space junk reaches heaven itself? So this really does speak to the fact that we live in a throwaway society. We discard things, we discard people, and we even discard truth when it's convenient. So just as we've littered the planet and the oceans, now space, how many times do we litter our own lives? Our own lives are littered with broken relationships, abandoned commitments, and neglected faith. So we're in spring, right? Spring is here, spring cleaning. What if we begin to clear the junk that's in our space, the junk that's in the space of our hearts, our minds, our souls, our relationships? What's the debris that might be floating around that's about to have a collision and cause some serious problems? Maybe it's unresolved conflict, unresolved hurts, unconfessed sin, or misplaced priorities in our life that's causing us to be stuck in this negative spiritual orbit that we need to break free from. The writer of Hebrews chapter 12 verse 1 said, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles us. So it's a sign to be committed to a cleanup mission, to clear the junk, restore what's broken, refocus on what truly matters. You see, God has called all of us to be stewards. It's called the Genesis mandate. In the book of Genesis, he said, be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth. We're to be stewards of God's creation, but we're also to be stewards of our hearts, our minds, and our relationships. So the question is, what debris is in your life right now that needs to be removed before it causes a major collision? And in the society we live in today, the more we consume, the more we discard. We consume, discard, and move on. But the more we have those type of experiences, and only those type of experiences, it leaves us with a sense of emptiness. Solomon, in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verse 2, he said, absolutely pointless, says the spokesman, absolutely pointless. Everything is pointless. Everything is vain. All of life is vain if we're simply living for that which is under the sun instead of living for the person that is above the sun who created all things. So let's clean out the junk in our space and let's get ready for what God has for us next.